Japan and China say they'll work together to encourage North Korea to abandon its nuclear program in its latest sign of improving relations between Asia's two largest economies. Foreign Minister Wang Yi's trip to Tokyo was the first of its kind in more than 8 years and comes ahead of the Korea summit and President Trump's potential meeting with Kim Jong-un. That's a big one that we're waiting for. We're joined now by the former Australian ambassador to China, Geoff Raby. Geoff, great to have you. Your views on these developments. Do you think this is really a game changer? A lot of people were very sceptical that these meetings were even going to take place.
Yeah, look, I think the improvement in China-Japan relations is very welcome and very real, and I think it reflects that there is now a lot of moving parts, particularly in the region. So South Korea began it when they had their Winter Olympics diplomacy with North Korea, and out of that came an announcement that President Trump would meet with Kim Jong-un. It surprised everyone. I think it might have surprised the White House as well. And then China, I think, had scrambled to play itself back into the game. And the visit of Kim Jong-un to Beijing 2 weeks ago was very, very significant. And now this with Japan. Of course, Japan wants to be a player on any developments in the peninsula as well. So this is all very important at a time of a lot of moving parts.
And Beijing obviously doesn't want to be left out.
No, and they've dealt themselves back in very well with this most recent visit by Kim Jong-un. So in many ways, the US is playing catch-up, I think, now in North Korea.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about how these meetings will take place, and we've got Shinzo Abe going to Mar-a-Lago later on this week, and President Trump has this strategy where he wraps up security issues, geopolitical issues, along with trade. Is that a strategy he's likely to take? And if you were at that negotiating table, how would you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, it's unusual, to say the least. But I think they are separate, and I think he deals with them in a separate way, even though he'll raise both when he meets Abe, of course. I think the trade issue, though, is also a bit behind the Japan-China rapprochement, because both of them will be adversely affected by unilateral trade actions by the US. So there's not a trade-off. There's not a trade-off between what happens on the security side and what happens on the trade side. But Trump has made it clear he has two primary objectives, particularly when it comes to China. One is getting China to do more on North Korea, and I think he's been successful. And two is the trade imbalance with China.
Geoff, it goes back to history. It goes to Lord Palmerston, doesn't it, who said if you want to look at a country's foreign policy, look at their trade policy. So we're going back to basics in essence, aren't we?
Well, foreign policy is best conducted on the basis of interest, which is also Palmerston's point. And what you're seeing here with Trump, from the time he was elected, is very much interest-based foreign policy. And as I said, he made it very clear that he wasn't interested in the South China Sea so much. What he was interested in was North Korea and the trade imbalance, and he saw that China could do a lot to help him on those two issues.
Yeah, no perpetual enemies, only perpetual interests, I think was what he was saying many years ago.
That's exactly right.
That's just...
Yeah.
So we have a situation now where also North Korea has managed to drag everybody in, and actually he's been quite cunning as a diplomat and a politician here, hasn't he, Kim Jong-un?
I think North Korea has negotiated brilliantly, Rish. I mean, they have nothing. They've got nothing going for them. They're a clapped-out state, and yet they have the world running around in circles after them. I mean, I think it's quite extraordinary. And what Trump has said now is that he will see Kim Jong-un only on the basis that there will be discussions about denuclearization. The US position for a decade has been they'll only talk if there is a commitment up front to denuclearization. So this is a huge concession that Kim Jong-un's been able to extract out of the US.
Geoff, where are we at in trade wars, trade tussles, trade tensions? We've had the US at the end of last week saying they're open to rejoining TPP. Most of these tariffs had exemptions. Xi Jinping's, another remarkable speech last week at Boao, really kind of positioning himself as offering an alternative to the US model for growth. Where does that leave us? I mean, is it a true market concern that we're going to get to some sort of altercation?
No, look, I think what we're seeing are all the elements of a big change in the world order. And the Asia-Pacific, particularly East Asia, is the key theatre that is being played out. I mean, you've been talking about Syria all morning, and that's another theatre. But I think in terms of the big geopolitical repositioning, it's happening in East Asia. And it's all around the rise of China and perhaps the Americans' loss of commitment to world leadership. And so that's why there are so many parts that are moving, both in geopolitical, strategic, and also in trade terms. And this has got a long way to go before it plays out. So, for example, TPP, Trump, if he decides to rejoin it, it would be a double back somersault with Pike. It would be the biggest turnaround.
But it's the ultimate way to curtail China's ambitions.
Precisely. So it's driven by a geopolitical consideration, not his Rust Belt supporters.
You are ambassador to China. I mean, this whole sort of targeting of Chinese ambition and Chinese innovation, is that fair?
The short answer is it's not fair. It's not clear, though, that it really is being targeted, or even if they were to target it, they could do much about it. But it's all, again, the challenge of creating space for an emergent China. It's happening, but there are new theatres of contest and conflict emerging all the time in this very dynamic situation.
Geoff, very quickly, has the United States left it too late to reassert its world leadership?
Short answer is no, because it is still leading the world. It's the only global player in the world. It has the military capacity to support its global role. There is nothing like the United States in terms of weight in the world, in terms of shaping geopolitics. But we are moving from very much a unipolar, or we have moved from a unipolar world, which has prevailed now for the last several decades, to a multipolar world. Just what that looks like is not clear, and this is the contest that's underway and will continue for quite some time before there's a new order. But the new order will involve many more players in future than it has in the past with just the United States.
Geoff, great having you on the programme. Geoff Raby there, former Australian ambassador to China, with his thoughts on what's happening with US-China relations and global issues there as well.